the legend of one of the first true Sith Lords that we know today, a Dark Lord of the Sith that was not a species but grew to adopt the ideology of the Sith, the ideology of power and dominance over all of those lesser, which in the case of this Sith Lord meant everyone. Both the Sith and the Jedi orders arose and grew around the same time period. However, they were far different than the Jedi and Sith that we know today. In this video though, we will discuss one of the pioneers of the Sith order and a former Jedi himself. After the ancient Jedi Order turned away from the philosophy of balance and began focusing on the light side of the Force, there were a few Jedi that did not agree with this new philosophy adopted by the Order. These Jedi, in secret, still desired to study the dark side of the Force, and as you well know, those that study the dark side eventually are corrupted fully by it. This Jedi Master's name was Martynas. Mur was among some of the first Jedi to ever turn to the dark side of the Force and consider themselves Dark Jedi. Mur was one of the pioneer members of the Dark Jedi during the galactic-wide event known as the 100-Year Darkness, or Jedi Civil War. The conflict of the Jedi Civil War essentially revolved around a group of Jedi believing that they should still follow the ancient ways and study the dark side in some degree. However, there was also the group of Jedi, the faithful Jedi, including the Council, that believed that the light side of the Force was the path that the Jedi Order were meant to follow. Unfortunately, and eventually, both groups turned to violence. What resulted was a war that lasted exactly 100 years, as thousands upon thousands of Jedi fell by the lightsabers of their brethren. Eventually, the faithful Jedi that followed the light side of the Force, because of their strength in numbers, conquered the Dark Jedi. However, because of the immense bloodshed, these faithful Jedi refused to execute the Jedi that surrendered during the final conflict, believing there had already been too much bloodshed. What they did do though was strip them of their weapons and exiled them into unknown space, with hope that they would find their path yet again and one day return to the Order. A hope though that would never be fulfilled. A hope that would turn to hatred, as these Dark Jedi would spawn the first true Dark Lords of the Sith. After drifting through unknown space for an undisclosed amount of time, the Dark Jedi eventually fell upon the Sith species. What they discovered from the Sith is that they were naturally incredibly powerful in the dark side of the Force, more powerful inherently than the Dark Jedi. However, what the Dark Jedi had was knowledge and understanding of the Force. Essentially, the Sith were more powerful naturally, but the Dark Jedi had put in the work and studies. In order to prove his dominance, Martynas revealed something that he had taken from the Jedi Order before his exile. It was revealed that Mur had actually managed to keep his lightsaber as the Jedi Order went through all of the weapons of the Dark Jedi. In a show of dominance before the Sith species, Martynas ignited his yellow lightsaber, proclaiming that he was now the master of the Sith. Over the next few hundred years, the Dark Jedi, as well as the Sith, learned much from one another. The Sith, though, were eventually enslaved by the Dark Jedi as they became their masters. This event would mark one of the first true master and apprentice relationships in Star Wars history concerning the Sith. As more time passed, the Dark Jedi learned from the Sith and discovered how to access the dark side of the Force more directly. Prompted too by the dark side of the Force itself, Martynas, one of the Dark Jedi, was the first to proclaim himself a Sith Lord. As now a Sith Lord, and what the Jedi historians would refer to as the first true Sith Lord, he ingrained within Sith philosophy the hatred for the Jedi Order. The Jedi Order that had banished them to unknown space, but the Jedi Order that had unknowingly created their greatest enemy. Martynas would eventually go on to create one of the most famous and dangerous Sith artifacts in Star Wars history, known as the Mur Talisman. Upon his physical death, Martynas was actually able to imbue part of his spirit within the talisman. Throughout the remainder of the Star Wars timeline, those that possessed the talisman gained immense power and knowledge in the dark side of the Force. However, eventually, they would become corrupted by the spirit of Martynas, and he would again inhabit a new body. But that was the legend of the Sith Lord Martynas and how the Dark Jedi enslaved the Sith, but then became Dark Lords themselves. What are your thoughts on the tale of Martynas, and had you heard of him before this video? Thank you guys as always so much for watching. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.